Hey folks, welcome to our tips section. Today we're going to talk about page-specific library components, and that is any of the components that you would see in your page that's located in your library folder. It could be a news component, could be an image component, it could be a search component, anything like that. We're going to show you how to create a page-specific component that you can create and then embed into your pages. Now, typically when we do tips or videos, we do a Dreamweaver version and a Microsoft version. Well, today we're going to talk about concepts. The only real difference between the two editors is how you embed it into your page. So I'm going to provide information for both our Dreamweaver users and our Microsoft users and just sort of alternate between the two programs for anything that's of a major difference, okay? So let's jump right into it. I'm just going to jump right into Dreamweaver, for example, and we are talking about contents within the library folder and any of these shared components, creating a copy or a duplicate that you can use in a different page, so you could display something differently, or perhaps a different slider. So for example, maybe you want to have 4 or 5 different Nevo sliders displaying different images in different pages. We'll show you that. And for our Microsoft folks, very same thing. Library folder, here it is. We have a shared folder and we have a sliders folder, and inside we have pages, or we have folders within folders. Okay, now there's two key concepts here that we're going to talk about. There are two types of library components that we include in the packages, and these are ever expanding, so they'll change all the time, but there's always going to be two different types. There is a page only component, for example the menu top. That's just a library page within the shared folder. Or we have something like in the sliders folder where we have an additional folder. Let's use the Nevo slider as an example here. Right? We have the Nevo slider folder. There's our library page, and then we have a wrapper, a JS, a CS, and images. Basically all the code or the core files that make the slider work are located within the Nevo slider folder and the page. But there's one big difference. You notice we have this wrappers folder and sort of this Nevo slider wrapper. Same with our Microsoft. We have the sliders folder, Nevo slider, then we have this wrappers folder. And what we do is there's some key or core coding within the library file that we don't want you to mess up. We say that nicely, of course. But basically what the wrapper does is it loads in the Nevo slider page. And then the wrapper is the actual page that's loaded into your template pages. Same with Dreamweaver, folks. The Nevo slider wrapper is the actual asset. It loads in whatever you do from the Nevo slider page. Okay, and the reason we do that is because the slider wrapper itself may have some very important scripting or something that we don't want you to really have direct access to or accidentally knock out of place. So we put it into a wrapper to sort of keep it out of the way. Okay, so here's the concept. When you are creating a page-specific component, you're going to do one of two things. If you open up your library folder, for example, and you go into the shared folder and you want to make a different footer page for one of your pages, you want a different footer for one of your pages, right? You just simply make a copy of that and then insert that copy into whatever page you wanted it to be displayed in. We'll show you how to do that in a couple minutes. But if you go into, say, a sliders folder and you want to have a different Nevo slider or a different default slider in a different page, so you want to have different images displayed in different pages of your site, you would actually make a copy of the entire folder, and then you're going to load in the wrapper from that folder. All right. Same with Microsoft. We would just simply make a copy of the footer, copy paste. There's the footer there. We'd rename it something like footer about.htm. That's as simple as it is. We just make a copy of it, rename it, and if we wanted to use this footer in the about page only, that's how we'd start. With Dreamweaver, we would take the footer, we'd copy and paste, just Control V, Control C, Command, or whatever depending on your computer, footer hyphen about, and you can give it whatever name you want as long as you name it properly using all lowercase, no spaces in file names. Connect your words with hyphens or underscores, and make sure you keep the file extension of .lbi for Dreamweaver and .htm for Microsoft. And of course your editor will scream nasty messages at you if you don't. So that way you know. All right, so that's just creating a copy of a single page, right? Piece of cake, right? If you wanted to have a different library page, and then the embedding part will take care of it at the very end. But what about the more complicated? What if I have a slider? We'll go with the default slider this time as an example. What if I have a page, it has my default slider, but I want a different page with different images in it. Well, we make a copy of the default slider, the entire folder. So we just we'll just copy it, click up here, and we'll paste it. Copy, and then here we'll just paste, Control V. There we got a copy of the default slider. So we're just going to rename this entire folder. Maybe we'll just do it something simple like default slider 2. Okay. Now all we have to do is embed the default slider wrapper from the default slider 2 folder into our pages. Same with Dreamweaver. We go into the library folder. All right, here's our sliders folder. There's our default slider. We're going to copy and paste it. There's the default slider. We're just going to name this 2. Go ahead, let it update. No big deal. All right, so now we've made our copies, and you, of course, would go and edit these as normal. But how do you get a page to display this particular slider here instead of the one that's already in there? All right, so let's start with Dreamweaver, shall we? Let's pretend, or say, for example, that in our index page, we want to have the pictures from the default slider 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our index page. We're going to scroll down until we find the default slider. And we best do this in our code view. Okay, and it's going to be in the image component section. There it is right there. There's our image component section right there, wrapped in a div tag. See all this stuff in yellow? Yeah. All you need to do is real simple. Put your cursor somewhere in the yellow where it says library sliders, default slider, wrapper, all this stuff right here. Go down to the bottom where it says lib item, select and delete. You should be left with a div ID of an image component and a closing div tag with your cursor blinking somewhere like this. Just hit enter a few times to give yourself a little bit of white space, and do not delete that div tag or we're all toast, and you'll be having many problems. So make sure you have an opening and a closing div, and the little slashy thing there in front of the div indicates that it's a closing div tag. Put your cursor so it's blinking in between the two, and maybe even bump it up against the side just for fun. We're going to go over to our assets panel now, and actually let's just refresh our site first. Hit the refresh button. Okay. And go to our assets panel, and we are going to look for, you see the default slider wrapper? See how it's in there twice now? Well, what you can do is you can actually right click on these. You see we'll right click on the top one. You can do the locate in site, and it'll say, oh, default slider 2, that's the one I want there. So just close up the other one. Alrighty, so let's go back to the assets panel. It's still selected. Just double click it again so it's highlighted in blue, and then hit insert. Boom, there it is. And you can check because it says library sliders, default slider 2, wrapper, default slider, wrapper. Cool. That's what I wanted. I'm a happy camper. Now I've copied an image component folder, and I've renamed it, and then I've removed the original component, and I've now inserted the new component into the page. That's great. That's really all I need to do. Now, let's go back to our Microsoft program, and it's a little bit different in the Microsoft program because what we do is we go into our sliders. We have the default slider 2. And this one's even easier. You go to your index page, for example. You scroll on down to the section where our default slider is located. Okay, and you can always check the path for the library right here. And all you really need to do at this point is, if you know that you just renamed the folder, you just follow the path library, sliders, default slider, that's the folder name. That's the wrapper folder, and that's the page name. So for those who are bold and brave, you just put your cursor there, hit 2, and you're done. Or if you're really not sure about how paths work, what you do is just go find the default slider, expand it, expand the wrapper folder, and you just copy. You just go for the properties, and the properties are highlighted in blue. The path, that's the path to the file. Just copy it. Control C in your keyboard, or right click on it and do copy. And in between the double quotes here, see where there's a double quote right here and a double quote over here? just paste that path right in there. So if we deleted the path first, we had 2 double quotes, we just paste it back in, and then there's the default slider too. Now, same thing goes with, remember we talked about the footer? So just as an example, we'll just sort of keep going down here. See, there's the footer.htm page right there in the shared folder, but we created a new one called footer about. Well, all you need to do is just do the right click, select properties, although it's a little bit off the screen. We're just going to copy that entire path, and we're just going to paste it right in there between where the existing path is there, and paste. Now it says library shared footer about, so now it's going to load that specific page there. And for our Dreamweaver folks, same sort of a thing, right? We talked about the footer. We have footer about right here. We would just simply go down to the bottom of the page if it's just a single page library file, right? Find the footer LBI, find the yellow code, sort of click somewhere on the yellow, and then we can select the entire thing by clicking the lib item in the properties in the quick tag selector down here. Just delete it. Make sure we have a footer class, and in other words, make sure that whatever's left over is a container of some sort, of div container, a footer container, right? Something like that. And then we can just put our cursor in there, and then we just select the footer about, and we just hit the insert. Of course, I lost my focus there because I opened it. I clicked it too many times. So click gently and then insert. And now we've got a library shared footer about page in our page now. That's how we can insert a single library page. And once you get into the assets panel, it's the same, right? You just insert whatever page acts as the loading page, so it's either a single page or it's a wrapper page. You load that into the your template page using the asset panel, and that's all there is to it.